Jack.
Levi.
The Book Club from Hell.
Hello everyone, this is Jack with the Book Club from Hell, a transhumanist MGTOW collective seeking to transcend the weakness of our flesh, such that it may no longer slow us in our implacable quest to complain about Western divorce laws. Laboria Cuboniks is, in her own words, a polymorphous xenofeminist collective whose members include Amy Ireland, Diane Bauer, Helen Hester, Katrina Birch, Luca Fraser, and Patricia Reed. This collective, pronouns she/her, came up with the Xenofeminist movement. In Xenofeminism, A Politics for Alienation, first released in 2015 and the subject of this episode, Laboria Cuboniks set out her xenofeminist principles. Anti-naturalist, in the normative sense of naturalism, comfortable with technology, and confident in her ability to shape the world around her, xenofeminism is best summed up with the last words of this manifesto. If nature is unjust, change nature. Now, an obligatory self-shill. We've got a Patreon account, and if you like what we're doing, then consider sending us some cash. If you feel like rewarding us in less monetary ways, then consider rating us on your podcast app of choice. 5 stars, naturally. So, if you're ready to turn yourself into a space marine in the name of anti-naturalism, then listen on. Enjoy.
Yeah, this is cyberpunk feminism, essentially.
Yeah, transhumanist feminism.
Transhumanist feminism. It's like whoever wrote Laboria Cuboniks. Is basically a really big...
It's an anagram.
Is it? For what?
So it's an anagram of Nicholas Bourbaki, which was a pseudonym under which a group of mostly French mathematicians worked on, I don't know, some sort of problem in the 20th century, something I don't understand, something mathematical. But it's an anagram of their name. Laboria Cuboniks is 5 or 6 women spread out across the globe. It's not one person either. It's a xenofeminist collective.
They obviously really like William Gibson.
Yeah.
And I imagine they probably also have a hard-on for Ursula K. Le Guin, I imagine.
They probably prefer her to William Gibson.
Maybe. Yeah, probably.
Maybe.
But they didn't come across as like man-hating in this.
No.
No.
Their some of them must be graphic designers or something like that as well, or artists, because the website, how this is presented is really cool. You can get the boring PDF, or you can read it on their website, which I'll put in the show notes, because it's the much more fun way to consume the xenofeminist. Is it the Xenofeminist Manifesto? I think
A Politics for Alienation. Well, Xenofeminism : A Politics for Alienation. It's the manifesto. It's them, and it's them.
Yeah. Oh no, well in the domain name, it's like laboriacuboniks.net/manifesto. So
yeah, there you go. And they have a bunch of other posts and podcast episodes and stuff, or like podcast appearances on their website. It's a cool website. I like it. It's a nice design.
Yeah, because this started in 2014. Yeah, and they've been there's artwork for it that they've made. They've done a bunch of interviews. I did read some of the interviews to clear up concepts that were a bit vague in the manifesto. The manifesto is a lot of fun, and it's really interesting, but
it's very polemic.
They can be pretty vague with some of the stuff they say.
Extremely vague. But actually, they did a really helpful thing. On their website, they literally have like a link that's like key terms or something like that. What do you mean by alienation? Here's all the things.
That's the thing. It's if you just read it as the PDF, you're missing out, because the website's a big part of it. Because they do try to help you out with the glossary, with all sorts of interviews where they elucidate further xenofeminism. The website itself looks really cool. It looks like modern 90s. It looks like 90s web design, but with 2023 technology. It's really cool.
I enjoy their website. It's a very good website. Whoever is their nice graphic designer for that website, good work. I like it.
Smashed it. Yeah.
Smashed it. It's also very it's very cyberpunk sort of vibes. Yeah. It was like sci-fi.
It's very striking, sort of but actually quite easy to pass everything that's happening.
Yeah. Like it's pretty glary, it's definitely not conforming to like web
very
usability
bright.
standards. Yeah, and some of the contrast there is like, yeah. So like if you know, like anybody who's red-green colorblind is going to have a hard time with this. Other than them not like conforming to usability standards.
That's another injustice of nature that needs changing. The red-green colorblind need to rebel against nature and modify themselves so that they also can appreciate www.laboriacuboniks.net
/ manifesto / apologies for alienation. They do talk about like, you know, the weak and the downtrodden and all that sort of stuff, and then they've forgotten to make their website accessible. So,
well, maybe
how serious are they?
Call to action.
Yeah, it's a very subliminal
call to action. Yeah, that's how deep xenofeminism goes in the fusion of the artistic and the philosophical.
I'm sure that was extremely intentional.
Anyway, it's a really cool website. So, xenofeminism is basically, I think I said earlier, it was basically transhumanist feminism, and
yeah, it kind of is.
That's not too flippant. Like that's basically what this is.
Yeah, or
there'll
techno,
be, like I'm sure,
like techno-utopianism meets, I guess, a form of kind of radical feminism, but like trans-inclusionary radical feminism is like, because these guys are pro-trans.
Yeah, trans-include. So it's TERF versus, TERF and TERF are both pronounced the same.
Or TERF.
Trans-inclusionary and trans-exclusionary radical feminism. That's a major problem. That's terrible.
It is major. No, because here's the game they're playing. The trans-inclusionary...
insurmountable problem.
They know, because they are obsessed with language games, they know that by making the trans-exclusionary radical feminists, like giving them a term, they've like taken the default position of like, we're just feminism.
They are now normal.
And so they don't get to be called a particular like moniker of like the trans-inclusionary radical feminists. They're just feminists. Which is a very clever trick they've played there. I see what you did there. They've made people who just take the position of like, hey, maybe there's a distinction between somebody who's modified their body to become a man versus somebody who didn't have to do that. They've taken that position and then made them into like the radical like edge fringe group. Very smart.
Brilliant. And then that's right. With the convention that they've used to name chapters, is that just how hexadecimals are represented in C or something?
Yeah.
Like the 0x000x01?
That's like the prefix. 0x is the prefix in a lot of programming languages like Python. I think so as well. If you have a string representing a number, say, is it binary or is it hexadecimal or is it decimal? You put like 0 then B or 0x or whatever.
Okay. The design of this website and the design of this manifesto goes further. It even extends to chapter naming conventions or section naming conventions. They name them something futuristic and computer-like.
So the thing is, like, you know, this is
just so you know that they understand computers.
That they're from the future. We are computer people. We are cybernetic feminists. We have given out paragraphs, hexadecimal codes.
That's what's going to happen in the future. No one's going to use something boring like 1.
They'll use 0x01.
Yeah, exactly. That's progress.
You know, for 3, 0B, 0, 1, 0. Yeah. Everybody's going to be using binary or something in the future.
Yeah, the user experience of binary as a human being just blows conventional numbers out of the water.
Because, as we know, the decimal system is Euro-heteronormative and oppressive. To be fair,
defense, they didn't really talk about that stuff.
No, they did. They did get a Eurocentrist in there. They did say Eurocentrism.
They did get
in there. They got that in. They had to,
and that's expected. I find like they get a few strikes.
Yeah, they get a lot of strikes.
They get a few without me getting irritated. It's like I go into this expecting certain things, and yes, they did fulfill it by saying certain things are capitalist or Eurocentric. But they did avoid most of the pitfalls that really irritate me about this side of politics, in that they said that reason and logic and knowledge-making are powerful and are not masculine, and women can and should take part in these things. So, like, the things that really irritate me, they didn't do. So good marks for that. I'm sure all the authors are hanging out for me to say something nice about this manifesto.
I'm sure
now they've got it.
Now. They're like, oh, we really want to hear what Jack and Levi have to say about our manifesto.
Xenofeminism.
I think they're naming, they've fucked up the branding, because I went into it thinking like xenofeminism, like a xenomorph or like a xenograph or something, like cross species. I thought like this is going to be about feminism to do with like helping cows and stuff. That's what I thought. That's my guess going in. You know, because there's a lot of issues with how we treat female cows versus like male cows. It was like, well, there's a whole like potential genre here of like eco-feminist stuff. But no, they're talking about futurist cybernetic feminism, which is still cool. I don't mind it.
Well, I read in an interview that they have on their website, they have a lot of them. They were going over why they chose to call themselves xenofeminists.
What was their reason?
And so they said the prefix xeno should be understood in the context of alienation. And so xeno as in like something foreign, a stranger, something not from a particular community. Because they're proposing a feminism that lies outside of our,
like xenophobia,
I guess.
Yeah.
And when they talk about so it's one xenofeminism because they are particularly interested in this sense of alienation. When they talked about their concept of alienation, that was one of the places where they lost me. So this is not in the manifesto proper. So when I read the manifesto at first, because they reference Marx, I assumed they meant alienation in the Marxist context of, say, workers feeling this sense of meaningless and futility in modern capitalism because a worker is unable to determine their own course in life, unable to own the products of their labor because they don't own their actions as a result, or the result of their actions, because the bourgeoisie own the means of production and they're the ones who determine that. But in an interview, actually, they said, no, it's not Marxist. And that would have been good if they'd actually specified that in the manifesto. I feel like the manifesto requires quite a bit of reading of other things on their website to actually make more sense, particularly with key concepts like their concept of alienation.
You see, that's how they get you. It's just a little taster.
But when something is as important to xenofeminism as this different concept of alienation, which I will describe, then that should be in the manifesto. This is actually really important to understanding what they're talking about. Because when they say alienation, they're not speaking about an individual subject being estranged from a community or society, and they're not meaning it in the Marxist sense. What they're talking about is an estrangement of sapience and sentience. And I did think this was a little bit silly. So let me know what you think of this. So they say that the estrangement of sapience and sentience is what allows us to engage in abstract thought. And it will be our ability to engage in abstract thought which will allow us to liberate ourselves from the unjust parts of nature. Because one of their phrases that can sum up, or at least give a real idea of what xenofeminism is about, is if nature is unjust, then change nature, which I think is pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, Jack and I are definitely pro taking superhuman levels of testosterone to get jacked. So
that's the true
we're on board. Yeah, leave humanity behind. 120 kilos and 3% body fat.
Yeah. 120 kilos. I want 200 kilos. Ronnie Coleman, negative percentages of body fat.
I just realized, like, I loved my eyes are bloodshot.
I loved it when he started claiming that at one stage he had negative body fat.
He's awesome. I just realized that my eyes are bloodshot on camera, and I just want to just make sure everybody knows I'm not high. It's just I've been diving today.
Yeah, but what was I saying? Oh, yeah, so the alienation of our sapience and sentience. So Laboria Cuboniks, the 6-person international feminist collective, refers to itself as she. So, like, I'm just going to refer to Laboria Cuboniks as she because it's easier. So she says that we can understand sapience to be the human ability to use reason, both to reflect on what is happening in our lives and to consciously act on the world around it, and by extension to construct the world around us. So to make new modes of thought through which we understand the world and can view the world. She then says sentience is the awareness of one's own surroundings without the capacity to deliberately reflect and act on it. And she says these two things are alienated from each other. And she then goes on to say, okay, there's not a clean split between these states. However, they're different enough that they cause an estrangement from each other. And that gives rise to abstract thought. I'm not clear on why those things are alienated from each other. I mean, I suppose if you just say in the human animal, the ability to be aware of your existence and the ability to act upon that awareness are different things, you can make that statement. I don't know why they're necessarily alienated from each other.
Yeah, I think this falls into the category of like...
I guess my problem is like you can say these things, I just don't really know. It feels like an arbitrary distinction. Like you could equally say, okay, well they're all encompassed in the same capacity and there is no alienation.
I think this falls into the category of just like overthinking things. Honestly, when I...
Yeah, and actually that is one of the things that irritated me about this is just like how obviously overeducated all of the authors are.
Yeah.
The level of academic speak in this is near lethal.
Yeah,
this should be handled with extreme caution.
On that note, I was thinking like this as I was reading it, I was like, okay, the person, I assumed that it was a single person, but the people who are writing this are obviously all like PhDs in probably like women's studies or like anthropology or something. And nothing wrong with that. Go and study whatever you want. But at the same time, you can't be hoping to win over a mass audience with this sort of writing. It's just not going to fly. Like this is appealing to like a third year undergrad who's majoring in like gender studies or something, and they'll be obsessed with it for like... This is like
Tate Modern
years.
Catnip. That's what I think of it as.
Yeah, that's right. It's catnip for fucking lefty uni students who like are bored and like bored with the student union. Like it'll entertain them for a couple of years, and then they'll get to the real world and realize this is a bunch of nonsense.
Maybe I'm more sympathetic than you. I liked this, and I do think there are parts of it that
I'm not saying I don't like it,
and I'd definitely recommend it. I recommend that people read it. So, and whether I agree that if you don't like aspects of what composes of your body, the nature of your body, and we'll get into their anti-naturalism or their normative anti-naturalism versus ontological anti-naturalism soon. Listeners can't see me raising my eyebrows, but Levi can. I guess that is an approach to if you feel that there is an injustice in the body you have.
My issue is more
change it using technology.
An issue of aesthetic sensibilities. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with like the things they're saying in that regard.
The aesthetic sensibilities.
Just the amount of like academic
we can separate like
stuff. Yeah.
So and then in the aesthetic sensibilities, design of their website, tick, really like it, great. How they've written it, disaster. 1 out of 10 makes me want to vomit on myself.
Because you have in Jack and Levi a very pro body modification audience. Like I like performance,
particularly if it involves copious amounts of anabolic steroids.
Like we've had this, we haven't had this conversation on fucking air, like live on air. Yeah.
Speaking at my laptop.
Speaking at our laptops, yeah. But like, I would love it if I don't think we've had this on. Maybe we have. Who fuck knows at this one? It's recorded so much.
We've had this conversation so many times in face to face, but
on the podcast, like I actively like the fact that professional athletes take steroids. Like I want them to take performance enhancing drugs. I think all this USADA nonsense is a bunch of bullshit. Like get out of their way, just let them put whatever they want in their body and let the biggest, baddest, most chemmed up motherfuckers just smash each other to pieces in the NFL or whatever. Like I don't care.
Yeah. So like Levi and I hadn't seen each other face to face for over a year. and we met up with each other, and we had, 48 hours or so that we saw each other. And in a large portion of a dinner conversation was taken up with us talking about how we want
priorities in our friendship.
Not only non-drug tested sports leagues, but ones where it's actively encouraged us to modify your body as much
because
as possible.
look at the amount of performance enhancement.
Giant freaky dudes with robotic modifications smashing into each other.
Like, I don't think Lance Armstrong is a bad guy. I think Lance Armstrong is a fucking hero for putting all that shit in his body. Like, he's a walking laboratory.
Biohacker extraordinaire.
That's fucking cool, man. Like, I mean, let him even go crazy with in vivo gene modification. I don't give a shit. Get some CRISPR in you. Because when I watch the NFL...
I feel like myostatin as a gene is holding us all back.
Holding the species back. You know that if the bodybuilders could CRISPR that shit out of their body, they absolutely would in a heartbeat. They'd probably end up breaking every bone in their body.
Wow. Can you imagine what Doherty's gym is going to be like in 40 years? Instead of some dude offering you to buy some Dianabol from him in the bathroom, it's going to be him offering to use CRISPR technology to delete myostatin from
Such
you.
a fucking bad idea.
This is medical advice. There are no side effects to deleting myostatin. There are no downsides to it.
For listeners who don't know, go and look it up. It's the fucking coolest thing ever. Myostatin.
Yeah, look at myostatin deficiency.
Myo means muscle. Statin means to stop stasis. And so a myostatin deficiency means you just grow unbelievable amounts of fucking muscle. And these cows that have myostatin deficiencies are amazing.
Yeah, so the energy requirement for such an animal is high. It's very high.
Some might say 30 raw eggs a day.
High.
30 raw eggs a day.
But if you're following raw egg nationalists' diet, then you'll be fine.
Turns out those myostatin deficient cows are all raw egg nationalists as well.
They're actually just drinking the OG, the original Geronda milkshake 3 times a day.
And reading Xenofeminism, getting jacked up to overthrow the capitalist farmer.
Yeah. The workers have nothing to lose but their myostatin genes.
So bring it back to Xenofeminism. Okay, the authors Laboria Cuboniks had Jack and I as an audience, and we're very we're on board. We're very predisposed to be transhumanist body modification. Let's do this. And then just the fucking academic wankery. They just hedged it in so much.
Wow.
They have read way too much.
It's
of that,
obvious that they're smart.
Yeah.
And that's reading this. I just think I get it. I know you're smart. You don't need to keep hitting me over the head with it.
Some people, they're here, they scratch their butt and then they go, here, smell how smart I am. Smell it. Smell my PhD.
Smell the hand.
Smell the hand. I am so smart. I use big word. It's
I did take some examples of the most ridiculous ways that they would express what is sometimes quite a pedestrian thought in just the most turgid prose.
Smell the finger. Smell the finger of my PhD.
Yeah. Anyway, so here we go. So an important concept that they come out with really, really early on in the manifesto is that something being natural to them that doesn't make it right. They reject the idea that naturalness is in some way normative. And so, okay, actually, no. So here's a quote that can probably sum it up better than I can. So, anyone who's been deemed unnatural in the face of reigning biological norms, anyone who's experienced injustices wrought in the name of natural order, will realise that the glorification of nature has nothing to offer us, the queer and trans among us, the differently abled, as well as those who have suffered discrimination due to pregnancy or duties connected to child rearing. Xenofeminism is vehemently anti-naturalist. Essentialist naturalism reeks of theology. The sooner it is exercised, the better. They do go on later to distinguish their anti-naturalism, to home in on what specifically they don't like about naturalism, and it is the normative aspect of it. The you are born a certain way with a certain body, and therefore you have to behave in a way that is thought to be becoming of someone with that body. And so, I mean, I'll give them this. They're very consistent with, like, they set out at the beginning, okay, here are a few things. It's like, we like technology and we think it's a way that humans can improve the world around them, although it's not a given. We're anti-normative naturalism. And I guess then there's also the unspoken assumption that giving people freedom, no matter what their background is a good thing. But that's such a widely shared one in our society that it's almost invisible.
They've taken that freedom even for, like, you can do whatever you want. You can just, like, but they say, like, different, like, why even stop at 2 genders? Why not 100 genders?
Let 100 genders bloom. Yeah. I think they say.
Let 100 genders bloom, because we can just make all these different genders, and that's what's technologically possible, or could be technologically possible in the future.
And their discussion of gender is really interesting, actually. That was one of the most interesting parts of this manifesto. Okay, so I'm flicking through my notes. So section 0x02, again, this is very advanced user interface. This is future counting. Yeah, they wish to repurpose technology for progressive gender political ends, and they do say that it's not without risk to repurpose technology to progressive gender political ends. But they basically, in a lot of words, say nothing ventured, nothing gained. I think this is probably the worst part of the manifesto, is just how terribly it's written. Like, sometimes we've read plenty of things where the writing is bad because I expect the author is semi-literate.
Or it's like their second language or something.
These people are the opposite in that they're too literate. They've read too many books and it's damaged their brains, and they've stopped being able to write clearly.
Yeah, or I don't...
books are dangerous. People shouldn't read.
There's this... terrible. There's this thing where you can kind of tell when somebody is not, like, writing, and, you know, it is written by multiple people, so it's probably... I guess it's very on point, actually. They've done a manifesto by committee, which is kind of, I think, very, very on topic for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it reads like somebody... They're not writing as themselves, or they're not being themselves. You know, like Ted Kaczynski is a really good example. When he writes, you can hear it's Ted's voice. It's Uncle Ted's voice. It's him writing. He's not trying to be.
That's how his cuck brother identified him. Recognized Papa Ted's writing style.
Oh, this sounds exactly like my brother's writing.
Gee, this sounds like my brother. I hope he's not mailing people bombs.
That does seem like something he would do. He has been missing for a number of years now.
I mean, he did disappear to a cabin in the woods 15 years ago.
I feel like he was experimented on with acid, so probably my brother.
MK Ultra.
Got MK'd. Yeah, anyways, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. Their writing, however, it sounds like they're writing like what they think a manifesto should sound like. It's kind of like a bit meta, but it comes across as very, like, inauthentic. Criticizing their writing style, but it's jarring, you know.
No, but I think that's a valid thing to criticize, though, because it really affects the clarity of this.
It's like this
could be much shorter and much clearer, and they're not hiding a lack of content with this. No. Overwrought writing style. There is something very interesting here, and I think it's really worth reading. But that it irritates me because they're actually making these interesting ideas much harder to access because it's just not well written.
And it's well written from, like, the point of view is, like, the sentences work properly. Like, it's obviously it's
grammatically and syntactically correct.
But it's that problem that, like, is it left wing or just, like, I don't know, just, you know, the sort of wokey or, like, whatever the fuck is what am I supposed to, like, that type of writing that comes out of academia where it's like too much, the sentences are too long.
It's a particular style.
Yeah, it's that style. It's that like social sciences style.
When you read Bapcore and they'll spell, like, what mean, WAT,
Yeah.
Like there's Bap's ironic way of misspelling stuff, even though he speaks English perfectly fine.
And it makes me wonder, like...
different subcultures and different subgroups have different ways of signaling that they belong together. In the case of Bapcore Twitter sphere, it's they write like cavemen.
Yeah,
in the case of...
I really like that, though.
In the case of social science professors and things, they just overwrite to the point where that, like, anything, like it could be like the instruction manual to setting up a floor heater, and they'll manage to turn it into a 30,000 word manifesto and somehow blame capitalism for the reason your room's too cold and that's why you need a heater.
And why they can't put it together.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if it weren't for that, like, they have some, like, the substance...
That's the worst part of this manifesto.
The substance of what they're saying is really interesting.
Yeah.
Futuristy stuff.
Like, I won't be able to resist taking a few more cheap shots at how it's written over the course of this episode, because I know myself too well. I'm going to make fun of it more, but yeah, we should get that out of the way, that this is by far the worst part of the manifesto. And if you can tolerate this sort of writing, there's a lot here to enjoy.
On that, I one of the things I did like... I have a hard time saying I like anything because I have a cold little heart, a little decrepit little heart. I just don't like things.
Just a biological, unmodified heart.
But they're somewhat critical of certain aspects of, I suppose, quote unquote, modern feminism, which is refreshing to read, I guess, from a feminist book where they're like, here's some issues with feminism at the moment. So maybe I'll read a little bit of it, of like this one part. It's like, okay, your substance here is good.
Is this from 0x04?
0x05. And it's like, there's some substance here in like what you're saying. Okay, there's this concern that you have about like modern feminist agendas. But then it's just like the way that you've written it just makes it like completely like, oh, fuck you. Like, okay, so I'll just read. So this is from the first paragraph of subsection 2, I guess, or like section 2, interrupt. The excess of modesty in feminist agendas of recent decades is not proportionate to the monstrous complexity of our reality. A reality cross-hatched with fiber optic cables, radio and microwaves, oil and gas pipelines, aerial and shipping routes, and the unrelenting simultaneous execution of millions of communications protocols with every passing millisecond. Systematic thinking and structural analysis have largely fallen by the wayside in favor of admirable but insufficient struggles bound to fixed localities and fragmented insurrections. Whilst capitalism is understood as a complex and ever-expanding totality, many would-be emancipatory anti-capitalist projects remain profoundly fearful of transitioning to the universal, resisting big-picture, speculative politics by condemning them as necessarily oppressive vectors. Such a false guarantee treats universals as absolute, generating a debilitating disjunction between the thing we seek to depose and the strategies we advance to depose it. It's like anytime during a sentence, I have to take a breath to finish the sentence, you fucked up. Like,
yeah. Modern feminist movements are too modest in their aims and view universalist agendas as oppressive, and so do not aim to form these, is, I think, more or less.
And then it makes it hard to decode actually what they're saying.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That there are ideas in here that are really interesting, but they actually, it feels like they're fighting you when you're trying to work out what.
But I've had this problem with postmodern reading. Like I went to Amazon one day. It was like, what's the most popular book of all time on Amazon in the postmodern category? Went to that book and it's like, okay, it's got like 4,000 5-star ratings or some shit, whatever. It's like, oh, here's this 4 and 5-star ratings, heaps of reviews. Apparently, it's a good book. Open it up, completely fucking impenetrable. It's just a bunch of gobbledygook, and it's like, okay, I'm not saying don't make your audience work, but make them work at the right things. Like, what matters? Okay, a challenging idea. That's like, okay, this is a really interesting, like a really good example is like memes. Get your head around what Dawkins or like Deutsch or whoever are talking about memes. That's a pretty wild fucking concept. But the actual conveying it and clearly communicating it, like it's already hard enough to get your head around like these sorts of concepts without actually just making the writing impenetrable. Like, I don't need to decode what you're actually trying to say.
Yeah, well, it's like trying to watch a movie if the filmmaker just decided to film everything and then overlay static on every single image. It's like, I mean, there's probably a good movie behind there.
You've got to squint.
You're making it harder, and not in any sort of fruitful way.
No,
you're just making it more difficult for me to engage with what you've made.
And then there were also some being a little bit nitpicky here, aren't I? No, I'm not going to be nitpicky. What are some good parts? No,
we are always extremely nitpicky.
This is a book club from
We
hell.
have high standards.
There's sometimes when somebody's writing, you'll see like it's especially bad with these types of writers. I don't know if I've seen this in Bapcore or whatever, but it's where they'll say something and they just thought
Bapcore has different problems.
Verbosity. But in this type of writing, it's like they've written something and they think it's real clever, and they think it's like, here's a zinger, got him. This is a nice thing. So I'm going to read you one part where you just know that when they wrote this fucking sentence, they were like, take that. So this is from 0x0c. They talk about, I'll read the whole paragraph because it's the last sentence that just fucking pissed me off. If quote cyberspace, end quote, once offered the promise of escaping the strictures of essentialist identity categories, the climate of contemporary social media has swung forcefully in the other direction and has become a theatre where these prostrations to identity are performed. With these curatorial practices come puritanical rituals of moral maintenance, and these stages are too often overrun with the disavowed pleasures of accusation, shaming, and denunciation. Making some interesting points. Great.
So far, actually pretty good.
Yeah. Valuable platforms for connection, organization, and skill sharing become clogged with obstacles to productive debate, positioned as if they are debate. Still, come along.
Still good.
These puritanical politics of shame, which fetishize oppression as if it were a blessing, and cloud the waters in moralistic frenzies, leave us cold. We want neither clean hands nor beautiful souls, neither virtue nor terror. We want superior forms of corruption.
That last sentence, that could have been in the Eonic Futurist Manifesto.
That's
the sort
right.
Of nothing sentence.
It could have been in Eonic Futurism.
It sounds cool, but I'm not convinced it means anything.
It's not cool. It's the sort of thing that like a 15-year-old is like, this is what cool writing sounds like for my fucking comic book or whatever. It's like, no, don't put it, take it out. You've spent 7 years studying like gender studies or whatever the hell. Like, surely you can realize that's not a good sentence to put at the end of an otherwise like perfectly interesting paragraph.
It was good. Yeah. Okay, how about this? Here's a part. It's from 0x04, and I really like this. I think that our problems, as discussed at length in our feminist glaciology episode, with this sort of thinking are really addressed in this paragraph, so I like it. Xenofeminism is a rationalism. To claim that reason or rationality is, by nature, a patriarchal enterprise is to concede defeat. It is true that the canonical history of thought is dominated by men, and it is male hands we see throttling existing institutions of science and technology. But this is precisely why feminism must be a rationalism, because of this miserable imbalance and not despite it. There is no feminine rationality, nor is there a masculine one. Science is not an expression, but a suspension of gender. If today it is dominated by masculine egos, then it is at odds with itself, and this contradiction can be leveraged. Reason, like information, wants to be free, and patriarchy cannot give it freedom. Rationalism must itself be a feminism. Xenofeminism marks the point where these claims intersect in a two-way dependency. Yeah, so they're getting bogged down in word salad. It names reason as an engine of feminist emancipation and declares the right of everyone to speak as no one in particular. So I do like that they reject this quite self-defeating notion that some people have that reason is a patriarchal oppressive tool and therefore feminists should reject it, which I think is like that's going to get you nowhere. That's not helpful.
See, I didn't See, this is where they kind of almost had me on side. I was like, okay, so there are some people who get too caught up on the historical. Okay, like historically, a bunch of scientists are white men from Europe or Ashkenazi Jews, and predominantly male. So maybe you spin some like heteronormative like argument about, you know, science being male dominated, and the fact that they were kind of at least kind of disagreeing with that, I was like, okay, these people are trying to think about it a little bit more, like trying to be a bit more sophisticated about it. They're saying like, no, science can be used by women and feminism as well. So I thought that was fine.
And yeah, cool, thumbs up.
They delivered it terribly, but like if I
but that's a given. As we've said, that's a given. That's a blanket statement. Like, that is going to be a criticism applicable to every single part of this manifesto.
If I squint, they occasionally make points where essentially the stuff that I largely found I agreed with them on was like, okay, feminism can adopt and be a part of science, or like you can have just like non-gendered science and we can use it as feminists.
You expressed that with too few words, but I'll let it pass.
And the other part where they were like, okay, and there's also too much of a emphasis. Did they use the word like, or am I misrepresenting, like where they were kind of critical of feminism being too self-defeating, like, you know, that line of arguing, where it's you are framing the narrative as women, making like your narrative framing is that women are victims or whatever, transgendered people, differently abled people, whatever, and they kind of at moments they take issues with that and they push back against that. And I thought, okay, well, this seems like it could be productive, but they there's something about it where they don't quite round those bits of thought off. They don't follow through with it. They just kind of disappear into the typical futurist nonsense, which is like, in the future it'll be fine.
Yeah. Because in part, it's the limitations of a manifesto, and we saw this in an example of another well-written manifesto and well thought out manifesto, which I consider this Xenofeminist manifesto to be well thought out, and like style aside, they are like they have executed the style they've aimed for in the writing.
This is the most Jack can give it.
They've successfully performed their in-group ritual of writing impenetrably. So yes, they belong to the social sciences. Well done. But even in successful manifestos, just by nature of the fact that it's meant to be polemical, it's meant to get people more interested in the ideas, and so we'll leave out some detail. That's just a feature of this particular style of writing, or of this particular style of persuasive piece. However, they leave out some discussions that I think would be really useful to have in the manifesto. And then, like you say, they will have things in here that I don't think need to be in here, which are more platitudinous sections. As we talked about before, it would have been really helpful, given how significant their different concept of alienation is to the enterprise of xenofeminism. That would have been really good to have in the manifesto, rather than just in some random interview with the South Korean feminist magazine, which is where I found the definition.
Yeah, and I think like the point of these sorts of manifestos, I always thought was like to rouse interest and get people in the door, or at least
like the Ionic Futurist manifesto.
Like there's two main functions, like get people in the door. So like if I was really interested in xenofeminism, I could send it to one of my friends and try to radicalize them, get you in the door. But also like to the people that are already on your team, like give them something substantive, like a kind of guiding star, like this is what we believe in. But there's almost like there's something lacking. It doesn't quite have that, like, it kind of leaves the book open in a way that's like very unsatisfying. It's like, okay, what now? What do I do with this now? So do I chop my dick off?
Because it's like, what do I do? So integrated with the rest of the website. I think one way they've handled this well is it's very integrated with the rest of the website, and the website has a lot of this information and it's easy to reach. So that's
so they really
one
need
way
to
that they've tried to address that problem.
Have this just riddled with backlinks on the PDF too, because I read on
if they just had links to stuff, that could be cool.
Yeah. So, but, you know,
Oh, what about this? Here's an example of just turbo academic feminist prose. So I'm pretty sure what they're trying to say in this section is we want women to learn to be comfortable with computers in order to free themselves and others because computers are powerful tools. Here we go. I said that in too few words, though, which is a cardinal sin of academic feminism. I quote, "We are adamantly synthetic, unsatisfied by analysis alone. Xenofeminism urges constructive oscillation between description and prescription to mobilize the recursive potential of contemporary technologies upon gender, sexuality, and disparities of power. Given that there are a range of gendered challenges specifically relating to life in a digital age, from sexual harassment via social media to doxing, privacy, and the protection of online images, the situation requires a feminism at ease with computation. Today, it is imperative that we develop an ideological infrastructure that both supports and facilitates feminist interventions within connective networked elements of the contemporary world. Xenofeminism is about more than digital self-defense and freedom from patriarchal networks. We want to cultivate the exercise of positive freedom, freedom to rather than simply freedom from, and urge feminists to equip themselves with the skills to redeploy existing technologies and invent novel cognitive and material tools in the service of common ends." like it's cool if women learn to code so that they can take advantage of digital technologies too. Mate, that's all you needed to say.
Learn to code and learn how to use the platforms. Like get on Twitch or podcast or whatever. Like learn to code and learn to communicate online. That's the message of that paragraph. And yep. in so doing, as a feminist, go and do feminist stuff.
Yeah.
It's not that fucking complicated.
There we go. Yeah,
it's like, but the reason why I guess I just keep on bringing it back to this stylistic stuff is if they're actually, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that they actually are sincere in that they want to have some impact on the world.
Yeah, I really do think
that. And in wanting to have an impact on the world, presumably you don't just want to convince other gender study majors to get on board with your funny futuristic version of feminism. Like presumably you actually want to reach a wider audience. And this is just like completely unappealing to anybody outside of like...
Yeah, this does not work.
Like a PhD program in gender studies or something. Like it's just completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because again, like there are like some legitimately interesting points, but there
are a lot of genuinely interesting points. The thing is, like quite a number of the points are quite pedestrian. Like that previous section I read, it's like it's a fairly pedestrian thing to say, particularly in the context that I imagine all of the women who compose Laboria Cuboniks occupy, like academic centers. To say, yes, it is a good thing to have more women learn to code, I doubt that's going to meet with much opposition. That's a pretty
safe play,
thing to say. Yeah. It's phrased in such a way that it feels almost like they're playing at dangerousness or playing at some sort of transgression.
It's like the least transgressive thing that you can say.
Almost tries to phrase everything as this transgressive protest, and it's like, no, you're just saying more women should code.
Yeah. In fact,
not everything needs to be transgressive or dangerous to be worthwhile.
You know what the really dangerous and transgressive thing to say would be? It'd be to say less women should code. that's my social change. Less women should code. There's too many women coding right now. That's the transgressive. You want to be dangerous and edgy? Go fucking advocate that position.
Yeah.
Have fun with it. You're not going to get a grant.
I think I've said this in a previous episode. It's like transgression is always contextual.
Yeah.
And the sort of thing that is transgressive in a university social sciences department is going to be different to something that you'd say at a Trump rally.
It's almost like because they're in like this isolated Twitter. They're in this isolated like ivory tower, classic saying, like the ivory tower. They don't realize that actually they're not being transgressive. Like you're shouting at the world like there's some demon. It's like every fucking major corporation has boatloads of funding and programs to try and support women in technology. Like you could look at all the major social networks and stuff like LinkedIn and Facebook and all the major technology companies. They'll have some program where they're funding a scholarship, or they're trying to like improve like employment targets with women across design and technology. Like that is not transgressive at all. That is like actively being adopted as like a principle for like representation in the technology industry. And the technology industry is by far and away one of the most like left, or not, I won't say left, but like progressive agendaed industries on the face of the planet. And to like advocate that as if that's like somehow forward thinking and transgressive is just absolutely not the case.
Yeah. And it's also when you're always going flat out, you lose a bit of the nuance, because when the authors come to things that are just much less mainstream, it has a much lesser effect because they phrase everything as this exhortation to some groundbreaking new way of being. So when they put forward this idea that if nature is unjust, then change nature when it comes to your body, that is still quite radical.
Or there's at least different levels to it.
But its impact is just so much less because it's also women should code is phrased in the same glorious way.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, because what they're saying is like, okay, so different types and degrees of body modification are culturally acceptable across different cultures, right? The obvious, really common ones like tattoos,
like ear
piercings, circumcision, like male circumcision, fairly common. Even like breast implants, like like that's, I know women in our age group who have at least considered, if not gotten, breast implants.
People compliment me all the time on my delt implants.
Yeah, people compliment me all the time on my breast implants.
Yeah.
I guess
like there's a reason why people call you Big Titty Levi.
My zygote implants are going really well. Like my mandibular extensions are great. My femur extensions.
I've been DIYing it by just bone smashing and jelking at home to see if I can save on a bit of cash. But
there was this. I think we said this.
Luxmaxes are transhumanist.
They are.
Luxmaxes are the most powerful transhumanist organization,
and they actually put it into practice. They walked the talk. No, we had another conversation we had offline, which I thought was quite funny. After our Luxmaxing episode, Jack, was it you afterwards you found out that for a certain like particular penile disorder,
for treatment of Peyronie's disease, there's this like
they actually prescribe
that you hang off your penis for like half an hour a day for a few months that urologists will prescribe, and it works.
It works.
And of course, the guy interviewing the urologist was like, "What happens if you've got a normal penis? Does it make it bigger?"
To which
apparently it does.
Jack and I immediately rolled back our criticisms of jelking. It was like, well, maybe
jelking is now cool.
Maybe we got to give it a go, man. Maybe these Luxmaxes aren't so crazy after all.
Jelking's really cool. Was it a rolling pin for best results?
Peter Attia or something, was it? Like some huge fucking podcast.
Peter Attia, Saint Peter.
Like, like a million dudes heard that and were like, whoa, really now?
Whoa, got to see my urologist.
Back to xenofeminism. Yeah, so like, if they're advocating some of the more...
They're advocating for jelking, and I'm on board. the rest of the manifesto...
Where Luxmaxes, Jack, and xenofeminists like all can agree on is how fucking good is jelking. How good is jelking? Start jelking. Look, even if you've got a clit, start jelking. Make that shit bigger.
Yeah. It could at least be the size of your little finger.
Anyways,
that's progress.
The point that I was eventually going to make was they're assuming some of the more radical forms of body modification, which would be like full like gender transitions and that sort of stuff, which at this point in history is still a fairly like fringe thing to do. But it's interesting if you've read any, not that I've just got a girlfriend who loves fucking science fiction, so she's read Ursula K. Le Guin and has told me about it. And I think one of her books is literally about like, and she's a very like, she's ahead of her time in terms of the way that she thinks by the sound of it. I guess secondhand reporting somebody else's perspective. Was that her books deal with gender issues and like Far in the Future or like Other Planets. Like basically genderless alien civilizations or a genderless future, where technology has allowed us to break free from like these gender norms and all that sort of stuff. It's kind of what's being experimented with, I suppose. Transgenderism. See how it works out in the next couple of decades.
Well, it's now that technology has arrived at a point, where you can start playing with that.
Like, what happens when a woman can conceivably, like, I don't know, like, are we at the point yet where we can grow organs using our own, like, we can force an adult cell to regress back into a stem cell stage and then grow an organ?
No, growing organs isn't quite there yet.
It's not quite there yet. But we can retrograde cells into, like, earlier stage cells. Is that a thing yet?
You can induce stem cells.
Induce pluripotent stem cells.
Yeah, so
and
that
we're not
is
quite
possible,
at the point of like growing.
Getting them to grow into an organ is not there yet. That's a really difficult problem.
So hypothetically,
not insoluble.
Hypothetically,
I'm pretty confident that it'll get solved.
If we solve it for like a really obvious one would be like liver. You know, like if somebody's had some sort of like cirrhosis or something, or a tiny little
small
dick,
penis,
and they need to, if you've got a micro penis
and they can't jelk it any,
you can't jelk it beyond like 3 inches, and you want to grow an external penis in a vat using induced pluripotent stem cells grafted out of your...
I'm not joking. Like,
that will happen one day.
Or more like when this technology gets cheap enough, that's going to be one of the major uses of it. Just insecure dudes wanting uncomfortably large penises that probably a fraction of 1% of women are interested in.
It's like bodybuilding, dude. It's not about the women. It's about other men.
Yeah, it's not about women anymore.
Like, no homo.
Only
no
for
homo,
other dudes to compliment you on your dick.
It's for other dudes. I have this muscle car, big muscles and a big dick, so that I can talk to the other bros at the gym about how much of a man I am.
How many women will look at a guy and go like, oh man, I can really see the separation between his upper pecs and his anterior delts.
I can see that Christmas tree in his lower
I've got to ask about what his routine is.
Those striations on his glutes, bro. Just drops to her knees straight away. It's like, well, unless he's at least 13 inches, I'm not going to suck his dick.
Yeah, what's the glute ham tie-in like?
Does he have a teardrop? A nice defined teardrop?
Yeah, pretty good teardrop quads. Yeah. Liking how the VMO looks there.
Yeah, so that's obviously all for impressing other dudes, which is very strange that they all talk to each other about, like, getting women. We've been conned into talking about looks maxing again.
Yeah, we need to stop doing that. They talk about, they reject the illusion that the weak can prevail over the strong with no strategic coordination, and also reject they call it the melancholy, which is particularly prevalent on the left. They seem to define melancholy as the belief that nothing can truly change, this defeatism that prevents people from truly acting. So I do like that this isn't a call to being passive, which is something that seems to be the subtext of some social sciences papers that I've read. So, like, they're encouraging an active posture towards the world, which I like. Oh, here we go. How about some more academic speak? Academic word salad. I'm pretty sure they're saying here that social media platforms exist and we can't wish them away, and as such, they should be leveraged. So,
point. They've got a point. There you go. Now they're about to lose that point.
Yep. Oh, wait, I'll pull it up. So what is it? 0x0d. Naming convention's so fucking annoying. Can't they just use numbers?
Seriously. Or you should be able to do hexadecimal conversions in your head, Jack, like on the fly.
What this shows is that the task of engineering platforms for social emancipation and organisation cannot ignore the cultural and semiotic mutations these platforms afford. What requires re-engineering are the mimetic parasites arousing and coordinating behaviours in ways occluded by their host's self-image. Failing this, memes like anonymity, ethics, social justice, and privilege checking host social dynamisms at odds with the often commendable intentions with which they're taken up. The task of collective self-mastery requires a hyperstitional manipulation of desires, puppet strings, and deployment of semiotic operators over a terrain of highly networked cultural systems. The will always be corrupted by the memes in which it traffics, but nothing prevents us from instrumentalizing this fact and calibrating it in view of the ends it desires.
Just the level of so much eye rolling for listeners. First off, Jack and I are actually talking on camera this episode because our internet is stable enough. So we'll either upload it.
Our internet's stable, and I got a new computer, so my webcam works
on YouTube with our faces, so you can look at our gorgeous looks-maxed faces, or we'll do something with animation or something. But for those just listening, you would not have heard my eyes rolling back. In the back of my head,
slurping back into your head,
shaking my head. It's just so ridiculous. Who even thinks I'm going to use hyperstitial manipulation of desires puppet strings? Like, and at least apparently 4 or 5 people ran their eyes over that fucking sentence and thought, "That's good. That's what we want to say."
Like, yeah, nice.
Yeah, got him.
Do you reckon they did that little nod that you know some musicians when they get a particularly hard part down and they finish, they do that little nod to themselves like, nailed it. Do you reckon they were nodding to themselves they wrote that?
The lead guitarist like puts his head, like turns his head, little nod to the drummer after the drum solo. She's like, yeah, you nailed it. Nice, man.
Got it. Yeah. Smashed it.
Yeah. Hyperstitial manipulation of desires puppet strings. Yeah. Nailed it.
Fucking bullshit word. Get the fuck out of here.
I love bullshit words though. Hey, it reminds me of when I was 17 and I tried to, just, I don't know what it's like in your part of the country, but like our part of the country is just like, can you just bullshit the fuck out of your English exam? Just write the most bullshitty essay. This 17-year-old Levi trying to bullshit through his high school certificate using words. All right, there's this really simple word. Let me go to the thesaurus and find the words with the most syllables that means roughly the same thing. Let me memorize that and then use it almost correctly on the final exam.
Yeah, I don't think I used the word hyperstitional. It's a real missed opportunity. What about this bit when they're talking about gender? They say they're gender abolitionist, and when they say they're gender abolitionist, that doesn't mean that they want to construct a society in which traits associated with a particular gender are just eliminated. It's more they're saying they want to make a society where these traits associated with a gender are not used for the asymmetric operation of power. And they say that it's similar to how they're race abolitionist in that they want to make currently racialized physical characteristics no more determinants of discrimination than, they said, eye color. And I would like to introduce them to a certain vague veganess on the subject of eye color conveying specific and special privileges.
Yeah, as we know, there's a hierarchy.
Over a game of Miffarog, Laboria Cuboniks,
do you think they would like playing Miffarog? I think they would. We should see if we can get them to play Miffarog. Email them. Hey, come on the podcast, play Miffarog.
Actually, we'll send them a transcript of this episode and an invitation to play Miffarog.
You know who I think would genuinely be funny to play Miffarog with?
Varg?
The Red Scare Chicks. I think that'd be hilarious.
Yeah, probably.
Miffarog, and then like, yeah, I think that'd be really funny. I think that'd get around. Can we sub out the lame ass xenofeminist people for Red Scare? So
I'd want to play it with Raw Egg Nationalist. Raw Egg Nationalist can make us snacks, drinks. We can play Miffarog. We can each drink an OG original Gironda while we play Miffarog
with xenofeminists. Yeah, so Jack just summarized what they were trying to say really well, but the way they actually said
it. I am the screening function standing between the listener and this manifesto.
Like, if we could actually just get you to pass it, rewrite what they said in like 1/5.
Yeah, but then the entire manifesto would be like 300 words.
You'd be, but you would actually probably do like them a favor, potentially like make it tweetable.
Well, as I keep saying, there's actually there's something here that's really interesting.
Yeah, I'm going to point out one flaw that I think is pervasive, like more on the level of substance rather than execution, which I think is pervasive across all of these. Correct me if I'm wrong, but is it okay to call this sort of crap leftist, or is it like progressive, or is it neo, whatever?
Depends on how you define all those terms. But I'm sure they would identify with the left broadly.
Directionally, what I'm trying to say, essentially, like, wokey sort of crap is like this pervasive demonization of capitalism, what they call capitalism. And I'm not sure if I'm not convinced. I've not read anything yet, and it's kind of like every now and then I try to get into it, chip away at it. It's a very long book, but Das Kapital or Capital,
that's a rough one,
and Engels, and I chip away at it, and I just it's pretty rough. It's just like, okay, but you just don't understand capitalism. Like, you're criticizing something that you just fundamentally don't understand. Then I go and read a little bit of Piketty. Like, it takes about 2 seconds to realize somebody doesn't understand capitalism. And in this particular instance, because they haven't actually said, well, this is what we mean by capitalism. Capitalism as a word or as a concept seems to take on this, in this wokey sort of realm of the memeplex, takes on this like kind of boogeyman role, where it's like, oh, the big system. Oh, the capitalism. The capitalism going to oppress everyone. It's coming for you, disabled people. It's coming for you, brown people. It's going to crush you and oppress you. I'm glad I got a smile out of you, Jack. And I don't know what to say to them other than just like, go and read a fucking economics book. Like, you don't know what you're talking about.
A capitalist economics book.
Okay, yeah, there you go. Like, and then,
gotcha.
Of course, that is actually what they say. Like, they will actually say that. That is literally like one of Marx's points. Is like, well, all the economists are a bunch of bourgeoisie like speaking heads anyway, so we can dismiss what they're fucking saying. So it is really a losing battle. But let's just be really clear: the fact that, okay, very clear, everybody listening, you're not going to go and read an economics textbook. Firstly, if you are inclined towards reading an economics textbook, Saifedean Ammous just released a new book called Principles of Economics. Very, very good. That and Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics. If you pick up those two books and you read those two books cover to cover, you'll have a better understanding of economics, especially microeconomics, than like 99% of people. And you'll immediately understand why those people don't understand what the hell they're talking about. It's very simple. Okay, there's essentially two types of goods that you need to be aware of. A consumption good, which is something that you like consume, buy, acquire for consuming, like a banana, buy it, eat it, okay? Consumption good. Then there's a capital good. A capital good is something that you acquire not for the purpose of like consuming it directly, but for the purposes of creating other things. And so a banana could be a consumption good, or it could be a capital good. It could be a capital good if you're actually going to turn it into banana bread. In that case, the banana is capital. Okay, the fact that we have this distinction between different types of goods at different points in the production process, and that like I can be a capitalist and go and like use my computer to make a computer program and it's a capital good, or I can use it to watch Netflix and it's a consumption good. Like, that has nothing to do with the fact that like there's like some disabled person has got like a mental disability that inhibits them from being able to engage in like productive labor. Like, there's just two separate conversations. And the fact that these people constantly bring up, oh, it's capitalism, it's this distinction between capital goods and consumption goods, and like the distribution of ownership of the capital goods is somehow causing all these social issues. To me, like, what it's really doing is it's dog whistling. They're actually signaling to like their friends and colleagues that like, yeah, we know who the boogeyman is. They're not actually interested in engaging with like a productive conversation around this.
Yeah, and I find it gets,
I don't know if that's productive.
It gets much less coherent when they smash it together with particularly weird French theory. So they'll marry it with Foucault or Derrida, at which point it becomes just a complete mess. It's this very strange marriage of Marxism, to my mind, is very much an Enlightenment philosophy in that it proposes a knowable external physical world to humans, and one that, on being known, can be manipulated to the betterment of human lives. And then they smash it together with people like Foucault, who at times seem to be arguing with the very ability of human beings to know concretely anything outside of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And also this idea that you can constantly reread some text or some concept in a new light, and all you have to do is continue to deconstruct something. But somehow that continuous deconstruction stops when it hits Marxism. It's like, oh, okay, no, now we'll forget about our French theory and default to Marxism.
Religiously default to
Marxism's one thing. I think, like, I don't dismiss all of it, but it's particularly the blend of Marxism with people like Foucault or Deleuze that I think it just turns into complete nonsense.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's just this meme that just always comes up, which is like, just say how much you hate capitalism and how capitalism is oppressing and killing everything. And I just maybe I need to actually hunt out, like, other than Capital by Marx, maybe like something else interesting that's like a direct attack on that from like this part of the meme sphere. That's what I'm going to call it from now on, the meme sphere. We've got a sphere, we've got a giant ecosystem of memes, and there's these like little pockets where like there's this different like signaling and like boogeymen and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like over in Yarvin's part of the neighborhood of the meme sphere is like, oh, the cathedral and those bloody leftists and stuff. And over in the leftist part, or like in the academic part of gender studies, they're like, oh, those bloody capitalists over there. Everybody's got a boogeyman. Have you noticed that?
Everybody's got a boogeyman, and that boogeyman somehow always seems to be easily transmogrified into a Jewish person. There is a worrying unity with the characteristics of all of these boogeymen in these sorts of groups.
Yeah, you know what? Then again, that's why Yarlin gets points for saying it's the cathedral, not the synagogue, fellas.
It is with a lot of these things when they start talking about boogeymen. I actually award them points for not going into anti-Semitism. It is that pervasive.
Not
like,
being anti-Semitic.
Congratulations, you weren't anti-Semitic. Good on you.
I would like to know more about, maybe we should do like some sort of, that's a really interesting idea, like some sort of typology of boogeymen amongst different neighborhoods in the meme sphere. And I love this idea of like there being a geography of the memescape. Memescape, what do you think? Memescape, memesphere?
It is cool because
memescape.
In some ways, it's like how biological organisms occupy different niches within the environment.
Yeah, like ideological niches.
Similarly, within networks of people, particular memes do find niches and are able to defend those niches.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the information spaces, like online, they have like, you know, Facebook groups or like whatever, or like Tumblr back in the day, you know, like the Tumblrization of the left and stuff. But that also corresponds. There's also some, sorry, excuse me. There's like a weird correspondence between the digital spaces and the geographical and physical spaces because, and institutional. So there's like this tripartite. There's institutional spaces. So like what Yarvin was saying, he was saying like, there's certain institutional spaces that are like hijacked by these progressive memes that are really damaging. But then like these progressive types like we're reading right now would be saying that like actually like science as an institution, or at least like the hard sciences as an institution, that's where our boogeyman is. Yeah. That's really weird actually now that I start talking about it like that. I wonder if that's
in the same way that Jung sought to elucidate characteristics of various archetypes, maybe we could elucidate the archetype of the boogeyman. What does the boogeyman look like?
Yeah. Because they're often, like, take BAP, right? That's the case as well. Like, BAP had, like, the globalists are often in BAP core type thinking.
Yeast men.
The yeast men and, boogeymen. So sometimes there's, like, a monolith boogeymen, and then sometimes there's like the spooks, like,
like Stirner.
Like the spooks back in the Cold War. Yeah, they'd have the spooks, and so you don't know if you're talking to a yeast person. Like maybe this person's just a yeast person.
You think you're talking
like
to
an NPC. You don't know if, like,
an aesthetic youth with a beautiful physique, but he's actually a yeast man underneath.
But they have the mind of a yeast, and it's just like their aesthetics being propped up by their unusually high adolescent.
They're going back home to the
but actually
house.
Give them 10 years and they'll be pudgy.
Yeah.
Bloody hell! I would like to know more about this. I think everybody that we've read is actually guilty of this. Almost. I'm not going to stand by that statement, but I have a suspicion that it would be a high proportion. Except for Jung.
I don't think Jung.
But Jung was a really sensible person.
Jung's far too nice to have appeared on Book Club.
Extremely sensible.
He's far too agreeable.
Why did we bring Jung on the show? I don't know. It was a good episode.
We need a refresher every now and then. I really enjoyed that book, and sometimes you just need a break from the punishment.
Yeah. But these guys, Boogeyman is capitalism and just like kind of like poorly defined other parts of the feminist
asymmetric power structures
neighborhood.
Yeah, I will say, though, another point in their favour is they weren't anti-Semitic, which for the Book Club from Hell is an achievement, unfortunately. Like they don't seem like anti-Semites.
They weren't anti-Semitic.
Good on them.
Yeah.
Thumbs up.
Not anti-Semitic. Well done.
Love your work, Laboria Cuboniks.
Well done. 5 grown, potentially women, or at least women adjacent people. I can't even gender this composition of individuals.
I just refer to Laboria Cuboniks as she because that's what the authors do.
Labradoodle Cuboniks is what I'm going to call it.
Okay, what about this? In 0x0f, I don't know what that is in fucking normal numbers. They give a clearer definition of what a non-absolute universality looks like. So they keep talking about non-absolute universalities and haven't defined it up until this point, which is why we haven't mentioned it, because it's not really useful to talk about until you can define it. So what does a non-absolute universality look like? Because remember, they are aiming to make a universal and then work to enact this universal. So for them, it comes from intersectionality. And they say that intersectionality is not a way to divide up collectives into, I quote, a static fuzz of cross-referenced identities. So their antipathy to fixed identity, or the fixed in general, is very clear throughout this entire work. They constantly want to destabilize things that are fixed. Not actually sure why they want to in all cases, but that just seems to be something that temperamentally they want to do. Instead, intersectionality it's a universality, so it applies to everyone, where each individual is built from the bottom up, so they're not defined from above, for example, by a power structure which states that the male is genderless, or the cis is normal, or white people are raceless, which are the examples that they used in this manifesto. So this is how you can have a non-absolute universality. It's non-absolute because you don't have a power structure saying this is what characteristics mean in this environment, but it is universal because every person is made up of an intersection of their characteristics, the things that they choose to identify with, or they are born with, or if xenofeminists have their way, they can just modify as parts of their body as they see fit. So they say without this non-absolute universality, all attempts at abolitionism, so remembering they were saying they're race abolitionists, they're gender abolitionists, so all attempts at such abolitionism will only reinforce the current power structure. And again, they bring up race abolitionism if you don't have this particular type of universality will just default to whiteness and imposing whiteness everywhere. I'm happy that they actually finally defined their non-absolute universality. It took about halfway through this manifesto until they did define it, even though they use that phrase quite often. That was annoying, but I get this is another sort of nitpick. It's just put that closer to the front if you're going to keep using this concept. In terms of this complete chaos, I'm not sure how actually a society would cohere, and your society is likely to be outcompeted by some group with a greater sense of collective identity, which...
with a nice, strong state.
A very powerful, centralized nice, state.
With an aesthetic, youthful, and energetic leader. male leader, obviously.
Named Mussolini.
It goes without saying, I suppose. Yeah. Benito. 6'4" Italian man.
Big bopper.
Back from the grave.
Yeah. Fine, they use the word morcellation in this paragraph, which irritated me, but that I think we're past complaining about how they write.
That was an interesting idea. Okay, so let's take extrapolate out. Oh, this was one of the points I wanted to make earlier. Okay, which way do I take this? Okay, first point. Let's extrapolate out, and then I'll come back to the second point. So, first point is let's extrapolate out, increase globalization, increase race mixing, or what is it called, miscegenation. you get more bloody mudbloods like Levi, all right, and more weirdness on the internet, more Tumblrization, more just shaking stuff around on the God has got the earth by the poles and is shaking us around.
It's a flat earth.
Mixing up all the ideas.
God's got the earth pancake in God's hand and it's just shaking it up and down.
And he's tipping it up and side down. Yeah, just swirling it around. And mixing all the ideas and the genes around. So 1,000 years, you just have it's like that episode of South Park with the people from the future. They're just kind of an orangey, blacky, whitey, pinky, yellowy sort of color skin. Everybody's bald for some reason and genderless and all this sort of stuff. And now we've got the technology to just modify the body at will. What does happen to all these ideas of gender or whatever? That's a pretty strange future because you can, if you wanted to, in the extreme, and you said a person is more about their mind rather than their physical body. So if I could in Altered Carbon or something, take the mind out of this body, reinstantiate it in this other body, then we've got a complete delamination between the physical form of the person and their sort of cognition or whatever. I don't know if that's possible, if that'll end up being what happens in the future. But that does pose a pretty profound question of why are we even clinging to these historical cultural norms in the first place?
Yeah, that sort of future would be pretty wild. And that does seem to be what the authors of this...
I think that's what they're advocating, isn't it?
Yeah, they want that, but they do offer the caveat that it also should be the case that these characteristics that we currently ascribe to genders or associate with genders should not be viewed as gendered and should not be viewed as things which allow one group with or without the characteristics to impose power asymmetrically upon another group with a different set of characteristics.
And so when I look at it through that lens, the world is just inside of God's cocktail shaker, and we end up with a world where humans have such advanced technology they can kind of modify their body to do what they want. Identity and gender becomes a very strange concept, and it's if you happen to be born with an X chromosome, and then when you're 20 you can just do whatever you want to your body and you can modify it to be this other thing. And it's what the hell does gender mean in that context?
Yeah, to get pretty meaningless.
Presumably, I think that in my assessment of what could end up happening, what would be more reasonable to think is that because the world's so large, and in particular, presumably the population will keep on growing. Hopefully, maybe 10 billion people. We'll see 10 billion people in our lifetime, all over the world. We'll have enclaves just like we do already of people trying out all sorts of different social structures, more or less traditional, more or less futuristic, more or less body modification, that sort of stuff. So you might have places like, I know, in 1,000 years, LA, all the people there will be walking around genderless and stuff, but there'll still be parts of the world where, like, I don't know, a kibbutz in Israel or something, or like whatever, is still like gendered according to pre-body modification, pre-gender stuff.
Or places where this technology just doesn't necessarily reach. Like, if you go deep enough into the mountains in Nepal, it'd be pretty hard to get some sort of hardcore body modification clinic up and running there.
Yeah. So unless you can do it, unless you kind of merge 3D printing with like surgery.
Yeah, like a lot of other technologies would need to be quite a bit more advanced. But yeah, conceivably, you could. You could just do it wherever.
So that's kind of an open-ended question. My second question, actually, and I know we've spoken about this like years and years ago, was like the concept of back to growing your own organs. If a woman could grow from her own organs an external ovary,
like artificial wombs,
vagina and uterus, you could have an artificial womb, and it wouldn't even, like, we already do have artificial wombs. It's called using a donor, using a surrogate. You're using somebody else as your carrier. But that artificial womb, so to speak, is just rigged up to another human body. Okay, let's extract it out of the human body altogether and put it in a lab, in a vat, right? Like, what does that do to? Well, on the one hand, you could, as a woman, you could conceivably, like, how long could you put off having kids? And then two, like,
well, especially if you had a way
of you decouple
of somehow storing eggs and sperm that didn't degrade them, then you could have kids whenever.
Well, no, I guess, that's actually a really interesting point. Like, because we can store the information. We can take a copy of and then as long as we can reinstantiate the genetic code for a particular sperm into like a sperm cell, like, we should be able to get to the point where we could store indefinitely like 10,000 different sperms with 10,000 different variants from the father, like 10,000 different eggs, but it's in digital format.
Yeah, well, you could get to the point where if you could just store the information contained within a sperm, so the genetic information, and
then when you want to actually do the IVF
genetic information,
or
because that could be stored as a text file. Like, you could, in some sense, then you have people have a child remotely. Like, you put the text files together, and then this is all assuming that our technology is
outlandish,
far, far more advanced than now. So, if you have those,
do you think that's that much far further in the future though?
Yeah, that's.
You sure?
Artificial wombs, that's a difficult problem. Like, a lot of this is still...
Oh, sorry, not the artificial wombs. I meant like the digital storage.
Digital storage? Well, no, digital storage. Like, we can sequence the genetic information in a sperm and in an egg. That's fine. What I'm saying
it's
is
just the instantiating it again.
Like, reinstantiation in a physical medium is really difficult. It's what I was saying in far future is, if you have that genetic information from a sperm and from an egg, and two people say, "Oh, we want a child now," and you get onto your baby making subscription service of choice, and just press a button and say,
"Design a baby."
Stick these two genetic info text files together. You put them together, and then you instantiate it in a fertilized egg. Like, you get it 3D printed and then stuck into an artificial womb. And then you pick it up in 9 months. Get it cooking
we're
in an Amazon warehouse.
Years away from that. That's
Amazon drone delivers it to you in 9 months. That's the modern stork.
Amazon baby
drone.
Amazon baby
fulfillment center.
Literally a little drone.
Amazon baby. Papa Jeff will be cutting 3D us all.
Printed baby.
Papa Jeff makes it that all
then
the
we just have a generation
replaced with his own. he fathers a billion people.
We have a whole generation on the planet walking around with a weird Bezos eye. What happened? We got monocropped by Uncle Jeff.
Papa Jeff.
It's the end of the human species. Another inventive way Jack and I have figured out the end of the human species is the entire species gets monocropped cucked by
This
Jeff
is a
Bezos.
really good idea, though, for a startup. Is we could make remote baby
remote
making.
pregnancy.
Because as everyone knows, like the one part of having children that people don't enjoy is the sex that leads to fertilizing an egg. That's the bit that people don't like. So if we can automate that, I reckon there'd be a really big market for automating sex.
We can automate that, but you still have to finance and raise the child. So you still get all the difficult parts. You just don't get any of the fun stuff at the beginning.
I think automating away sex is a really good idea, and we should definitely try to get funding for this.
I think Valerie Solanas would be on board.
Yeah, she'd probably be on board.
Very
I mean, look, if she were both alive and an angel investor, then I would go to her.
The Solanas Fund. Yeah, the groovy bitches. The groovy, psychedelic, bad attitude, arrogant bitches
Pugnacious
fund.
bitches.
Pugnacious bitches fund. Yeah. Pugnacious capital. I like it. Capital. Tell me more. We're raising a fund, listeners. All right, we'll put up a Bitcoin address, send us your Bitcoin, and we'll start.
We are going to make sex obsolete.
We're going to obsolete sex. That's our investment thesis. Look, you think the porn and the sex industry is a forever bet? It's not. We're going to come in orthogonal to that bitch, and we're just going to completely obliterate the market for sex.
We make sex obsolete. The market has been crying out for getting rid of sex for years, and we're going to deliver.
I mean, look, the no-fat movement is huge. We're just going to feed that market.
Yeah, well, we'll make them obsolete as well. Because, so
this is disruptive innovation here.
You go into a niche, you dominate that niche, then branch out into adjacent niches. So first of all, we'll make sex obsolete, but then I'm sure we could somehow make masturbation and any sort of sexual pleasure obsolete. We get rid of it, just wipe it out. There'll be none of it. And everyone will have us to thank.
Look, this is a fertile ground. Got him.
So what? Got him. How did we even get onto this? I guess no. This is sort of related to xenofeminism.
Barely.
We're
talking
very
about the
loosely.
human body. Fuck it. I don't really have anything else to say about this. Do you? My last thing to say is fairly minor point. They use the word negentropic, which is like reversing entropy, but like the opposite of entropy. And I just think that you should just not use the word negentropic in any context outside of explicitly talking about thermodynamics. And the fact that they managed to work this in, again, it's just more evidence to my point that these guys are wankers. If nothing else, like, of all the interesting points I make, I just wish they weren't wankers about it.
Yeah.
This is my main criticism.
Yeah. I mean, most of my notes are actually me saying, like, something I actually wrote down is, it is unreal how bad the writing is. But most of my notes are really these things. Like, the task before us is twofold, and our vision necessarily stereoscopic. We must engineer an economy that liberates reproductive labor and family life, while building models of familiarity free from the deadening grind of wage labor. It's just, our vision is necessarily stereoscopic. That's not like stereoscopic doesn't mean you're looking at two different things. It's like this has a defined meaning, and they're just misusing it. This is actually not what the word means.
That's really funny. What if they said our vision is actually what's it like? Non-stereoscopic, like monoscopic, I suppose. Like,
yeah, I guess
we have a monoscopic vision.
I have no depth
you just
perception.
have no depth perception. Like, actually not legally allowed to drive.
Let's think through everything that follows on from them having stereoscopic vision. They have necessarily stereoscopic vision.
They have very good visual acuity. Like, their vision is all about being able to judge how far away objects are from them. They're really innovating here.
That's a very weird flex, telling everyone that that you have two eyes, each of which sees an image from a slightly different angle, and then your visual cortex puts those images together so that you can judge depth. It's a very weird flex.
Do you think they'll also start bragging about the fact that they flip the images so that they're not seeing everything upside down? They didn't actually cover that. Maybe they do see the world upside down.
Yeah.
I would like to read the final paragraph.
Yeah.
I think that's a good close. Yeah. What do you reckon? Okay. 0x1a. The final paragraph. Xenofeminism indexes. All right, you've already lost me. You don't index shit. Anyway,
okay, but they like computers, Levi. This is on brand. This is called branding.
Yeah. What Google indexes stuff. All right, use that word. Get it in there. They went to like a word cloud website and typed in computer and then found all of the words associated with computer.
I wish. No, this would have been better if it were all just in like. If this were in like 1990s leet speak, that'd be much better.
1990s leet speak, and if at least some part of it was in Comic Sans, like not the whole thing. Like if if the main text was monospaced, and then the titles were Comic Sans, I would be
and if the entire website were modeled to look like the text chat from Counter-Strike 1.5, that would have been really good.
Oh man, they would have won us over.
Then this would be a 10 out of 10.
0x1a. Xenofeminism indexes the desire to construct an alien future with a triumphant X on a mobile map. This X does not mark a destination. It is the insertion of a topological keyframe for the formation of a new logic. In affirming a future untethered to the repetition of the present, we militate for ampliative capacities, for spaces of freedom with a richer geometry than the aisle, the assembly line, and the feed. We need new affordances of perception and action unblinkered by naturalized identities. In the name of feminism, quote, nature shall no longer be a refuge of injustice or a basis for any political justification whatsoever. If nature is unjust, change nature.
I like that last bit. That last bit's cool.
Can we cut out the first 10 pages and just get the last line?
There are things in here that are interesting. Actually, when they were talking about gender, it was interesting how they were saying that a lot of the modern trans movement they don't like because it has taken the fixity of the gender binary and just added in a few extra genders. And then made that a new fixed point and said, okay, well, now this is normal and you can't change this and you can't argue with it. And the authors of the Xenofeminist manifesto say, let 100 genders bloom. Say, no, we don't want any sort of fixed point when it comes to gender. Do what you want. I thought that was interesting. But, yeah, I don't have much more to add about this manifesto. I'd recommend it. It's free. It's short. It's fun.
It's kind of fun. If you can put aside the aesthetic criticisms, it's kind of fun.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll say I recommend.
And fundamentally, it feels like
you do need to have a tolerance for academic feminist prose.
Which, if you don't have a tolerance for academic feminist prose, you're gonna have a bad time.
You're fucked.
Yeah. Worth reading. Interesting. Much else to say about that. What do we have on next? We have
the Conquest of Bread. We put off. Bread? It was we were meant to be recording it this weekend, but I haven't finished it, so we read Xenofeminism instead. The Conquest of Bread's interesting, but we'll save that discussion for that episode.
All right. So thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks. We'll answer Patreon questions next time. It's 10 p.m. I can't be fucked. I'm too professional to answer them at this episode.
Anything else?
No, that's all.
Join the Discord, follow us on Twitter, all that good stuff.
$60,000 Patreon tier is still unoccupied.
Still waiting for a true fan to actually give us $60,000 per month. Yeah, otherwise you guys don't love us, clearly.
Yeah.
We're leaving it up there until like Joe Rogan or something puts it there. All right, thanks for listening. See ya.
Thanks for listening.